Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court and CPS issues. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, and today I have Cheryl A. Kennedy, who is, in quotes, a fraud on the court crime victim, defrauded by an attorney in a divorce with a judge involved. Due to the State Bar of California being inoperable, it led to her subpoena of Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to a violated jury trial against the attorney in 2008. Attorney General Jerry Brown represented Schwarzenegger. He was later subpoenaed after alleged payoffs were made. The case's corruption went from San Mateo Superior Court in California to Albany, Ulster County Supreme Court under Cuomo in New York. Kennedy exposed many other victim cases over the years and had a U.S. Marshal assigned to her under the Obama administration. Kamala Harris directly involved too as a cover-up and evil continues. Kennedy is a constitutionalist, rights activist, and whistleblower and commented for years on election fraud, fake news, fraud foreclosures, etc. Kennedy has personally sought the military and Trump to restore our republic now. Cheryl A. Kennedy is the author of And Justice for All, An American Illusion on Amazon, a blog she maintained during the Obama years. And we'll let you know where she can be contacted in our notes. And we're going to be talking to her right now. And how are you doing, Cheryl?
Great, Marianne. How are you doing tonight?
Okay.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Oh, I'm glad to have you on. You have a lot to say.
I do have a lot to say, especially because I have such tie-ins to Kamala Harris. And the public are so misinformed because our media is fake news. It really is. And you don't really realize the corruption that these people have been aiding, especially her as an attorney general in the state of California, and the harm that is going on in our courts, because our courts are the most covered up topic in this country. And family law, especially the CPS, child kidnappings, and the alienation of children, every area of the courts is really corrupted, even criminal matters. So there's so much harm going on, but the public is not aware of it.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. And as I originally went to get divorced in 2004, which was a friendly divorce. There were only certain things I needed to have, figured out by an attorney. And my husband and I were on good terms. We were in a relationship almost 25 years. And little did I know for 2 years that I had been defrauded by this mediator in my divorce. And once I had been in California, I was on a crisis team, a Bay Area crisis team, and I was well-versed in trauma, and I couldn't believe the trauma that these people were causing me and the harm that they were to basically just steal my property. And there were just so many different things. Well, you can't even fathom. You're like, what in the world am I in? And because I was such an advocate on trauma and healing, I had worked on Wall Street for 20 years. I was like, I can't believe what exists here. And once I found out I had been defrauded, I had wanted to have this attorney disbarred. And there was nothing operating whatsoever, even the State Bar of California. And I started complaining to politicians. I was going to the DA at San Mateo Superior Court. His name was James Fox. I wanted her prosecuted criminally, but they wanted the bar to be responsible. But meanwhile, the bar continued to stay irresponsible. Mm-hmm. And I had in the state of California, presently, I had been looking at the State Bar website, and they were saying that they have 16,000 complaints a year. So that's a lot of complaints. So they said they're protecting the public, but they do not protect the public.
No, not at all.
And even when I was back at that time frame, when I had to literally go to the Supreme Court in San Francisco under the office of Frederick Allwich, who was the clerk of the court. And I did get some help there to finally get the bar to open up an investigation in my case. And one of the issues, I had a lot of issues, and was fighting a lot of corruption in my divorce. And when I finally sued the attorney, her name is attorney Eileen Avila, and I have a fraud ruling against her. I fought a civil case against her, and her legal counsel was this big international law firm, Wilson, Elser, Moskowitz, Edelman, and Dicker, which were mainly out of New York, but they're in San Francisco and a lot of other places. But they knew I was defrauded, but and they're a lot bigger than me. When you're dealing with this type of corruption, I had a lot of harm. I had physical injuries. I had businesses being destroyed, so I kept fighting back. Because I'm like, well, I have to get justice,
Mm-hmm.
But because when I started to go for my jury trial, they would not attend. The State Bar would not attend they slapped her on the wrist. They still didn't do anything. And her documents, she actually even defrauds the court as to my identity with the court. And it really is a criminal case, but you have to go through a civil case because no one will do anything. And it ended up, I was subpoenaing everybody and their brother, judges, because I'm like, you all know I'm defrauded. Why am I having to fight this way? And they kept harming my assets and everything. And my marital status, like the 21-year marriage, was terminated fraudulently. United Airlines was defrauded. I had this attorney stealing a property out of a judgment, a divorce judgment that was fraudulent, but it was my property. So that became a big issue, and why my case went to New York also. And so when it was time for my jury trial, because the State Bar was denying any, even the investigator, they denied them ever coming to my jury trial or anything. And I had been complaining to politicians, and I had actually, interesting, Senator Feinstein has been in the news as of late with her Chinese ties and all that. And she's been a long-term senator in California from in the early 90s. And what's ironic is I actually had worked in her husband's office for a hedge fund, tied to her husband, Richard Blum. And I could go on about a variety of different stories there, but I'm not. But when I sometimes said to myself, was I on a list to screw with, because I worked there, they chose me to pick on, because I'm the type who would fight back, but because I think to myself, why did this woman choose me to defraud in the divorce, because my husband would have easily just, given up, but not me.
Right.
I'm I'm determined to have justice.
It's good you're a fighter.
I'm a fighter. And so I subpoenaed Schwarzenegger because he was the governor. I had been writing him, and actually have a letter from Feinstein saying, that the governor would have jurisdiction. Well, what I learned is really nobody has jurisdiction to anything. This was the biggest issue. I was because even when I was going, I would contact the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI. Nobody has jurisdiction, anything. Other Congress people who are supposedly representatives right in your community, they don't represent you. That's the real thing you need to understand. None of these people represent you. And they'll all be like, oh, I have no jurisdiction. There's a firewall. But this firewall is really created to aid all the organized crime going on in the court system. And it's now gotten so out of control that, it's infiltrated everywhere. And at that time, before I subpoenaed Schwarzenegger, I was like, who the hell's running this state? No, this is country. I was like, at that time, I'm thinking, is Britain infiltrated here? Who, what country is in here running our country? And really, I learned over the years, there really are a lot of usurped entities, running our country. And I'm like, wow. And even the bar attorneys, there's lots, that could be tied to Britain with the Esquire title and titles
Mm-hmm.
of nobility. There's a whole variety of things. There's so many different issues that at that time I didn't realize yet. But I subpoenaed Schwarzenegger to the jury trial, and it ended up um, he wasn't going to appear. And actually, I had 2 days when I was going for the jury trial, and on the second day, now I'm like, just settle the matter, just settle the matter,
Right.
just resolve the issue. But no, of course not. That doesn't happen. So it ends up I leave demanding a jury because they're trying to give my jury trial to a bench trial with a judge who's trying to intimidate me and all this.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I had it. I'm not being intimidated by nobody. And it ended up, I had gotten that day a letter from Governor Jerry Brown. He was Attorney General Governor Jerry Brown at the time, and he was representing Schwarzenegger. And I talked to the man who wrote me the letter, and I told him I left, demanding a jury trial. And it ended up probably about a month goes by, and they enter that a default judgment that I owe $4,500. I'm like, really? I owe $4,500? And so this was like, a slap in my face after this whole thing, because the county really should have settled. And the state bar is there's a woman, I'm going to name her because her name is State Bar Attorney Rachel Grumberg, a total crooked woman. And they collude with Wilson Elser, the insurance company. Everybody colludes to screw me over. And, and so then I tried to vacate the judgment. And at the time, Obama was running for office. And there was in Half Moon Bay, California, there was an event. And Congresswoman Jackie Spears and Congresswoman Anna Eshoo were there, also an assemblyman. And I went to it, and I have a picture actually of me speaking out with Congresswoman Jackie Spears on the stage, and she has these children lined up on the stage, and I invited her to attend the vacating of my judgment that Schwarzenegger was subpoenaed to, to this whole thing, and Brown, and she's saying, "Oh, children are our future," and I'm saying children are being harmed. Families are being harmed, but they don't care. And so, and Anna Eshoo at the time, she was like gripping my arm, like really like frozen. And at the time I didn't realize why, but years later, I come to find out that the judge who's involved in this initial scheme with Avila at the time he was named Commissioner Richard Dubois. He's now a judge. But there's a relationship with Congresswoman Anna Eshoo. Her ex-husband had a private law practice with him. So I think that's another part of why there's been this cover-up and all these different things that have gone on. But meanwhile, my case had then gone to New York under Cuomo, who was Attorney General, and now he's been governor for years. And at the time, when I wrote Cuomo as the Attorney General, he came out, his letter is, I have no jurisdiction, because nobody has jurisdiction. And in New York, they do things a little different. They have the third appellate grievance committee up in Albany. That's where you send your complaints. And I had issues there with this foreclosure. Because one of the big things that for me with this foreclosure, well, there's numerous frauds in the foreclosures. There's really a lot I could go into on foreclosures, but in this situation, I had these attorneys, this law firm, Rosicky and Associates out on Long Island. They were altering my identity to a car judgment of a Cheryl B. Kennedy and a James Byrd, who weren't me. So, but I was able to use that then to say, hey, this isn't me, And so I took that up and I sued the county clerk who I had been going to, saying, I'm like, she's the county clerk. I'm like, they're using a car judgment here as my identity, but she didn't care, And so I ended up suing them, and it ended up, I was really being pushed into poverty from everything going on. And because I ended up having the foreclosure halted, though they ended up violating my due process against all the parties I sued in the foreclosure. So I still had kept my home for many years. But I had a lot of chaos that went on like repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
And which was really pretty damn a big Fourth Amendment rights violation, like you can't imagine. And I started when Kamala Harris came into the scene. That was like the beginning of 2011. Now I know because I had become involved in exposing different people's cases, like I had started having a lot of victims of this judge in the San Mateo case, Richard Dubois. I had these victims coming to me of this judge, and I ended up exposing with another advocate. This was in 2009. We exposed at the time 7 cases of corruption by this judge. And in all the cases, mainly the crimes were against women and children. And when you look at these cases, and there's also cases that I know about after the fact, after that exposure, but in all the cases, the people are having serious injuries, heart attacks, collapsing in court. One went from a divorce to an estate theft because one person dies, a murder of a child. There's this other woman who's the one stealing my home, another attorney that I dealt with, her name's Lisa Degoni, where a murder actually takes place at her office, because this woman, if you knew this woman, how nasty she is and vile and evil, like to me, when I read the story on it, I'm like, she pushed this man right over the edge. I mean, so this is people just going to get divorced and you're being annihilated. And to have this many heart attacks and stuff just shows the abuse of the system, especially the adversarial process in divorce, which I'm a big advocate against. It causes too much trauma and is just really for attorneys to steal property, kids, whatever they want to steal or alienate families, is just really, that process should really, I actually in 2007 made a film, Wake Up to Reality, ban the adversarial process of divorce and adopt it as a human rights violation, because it's a severe human rights violation. And it's also cruel and unusual punishment under the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. But, and it's a serious issue, and how these divorces really just get out of control, and they really cause so much harm to people. And, now, I mean, I still don't even have a lawful divorce decree, and this is 16 years later. And I've had Kamala Harris directly involved in my case for her whole time as Attorney General. And because I had so much corruption at this foreclosure on my house, where people it got so bad in 2014, and this is when Harris is involved, her office, it got so bad that I didn't know what was going on, because I started having people stalking me, and they were breaking into my house repeatedly. And little did I know that I call her the psychopath county clerk, because she is one as far as I'm concerned. But she had ended up, and I didn't know it, but behind the scenes, they had started opening up this foreclosure again that had been closed. And I had 2 of the head county people. This guy, he was the executive, Mike Hines, and the county attorney, Beatrice Kaepernick. I call it 10 years of evil with them, because I mean, they let me be abused repeatedly in my home. And
that's terrible.
Just went from one thing to another. You can't believe it. And they sold my home. I didn't even know it. So yeah. So I mean, and then they stole everything, even my belongings. I mean, that's how crazy it got. And then it even got crazier, because I'm such a fighter, and I ended up years later. Well, I mean, it didn't really get stolen till 2015. So Harris was still involved. She let the sale go through, And I mean, I've cursed her out personally, you know, because I'm like, I think you're all nuts, you know, because
Mhm. Mhm.
nobody's in charge of anything, you know. I go, is there anybody in charge of anything out there? You know, I mean, that's how bad it is. And so I ended up, because I'm like, you could never have stolen my property. Plus, they altered my identity again to the car judgment, and now the car judgment is missing, and they alter my address. Even. I go, there's nobody who could have. And there's more to it with the sheriff's department serving charges on the county clerk years earlier. And so what I ended up doing is I was in this big conversation with the guy who has my property. They even became part of the scheme, and the sheriff. And so I ended up, there were different things that led me that I said, I'm going back in my property because it had become an Airbnb. And I said, I'm making a stand that this is my property and you better get the hell out of my land. And
Mhm.
so I ended up going to jail. And it ended up, that was so corrupt, you can't even, I'm like, there's not, this foreclosure could almost take down almost a whole county almost because of one foreclosure on how crazy it became.
Mhm.
But so, I mean, I have been fighting these people for years, you know, besides other types of cases and things like that. But, you know, and that, you know, one of the biggest problems, and I'm sure, I know, you know, some of these issues with children being stolen, I had gotten very involved with CPS because someone I know had their grandchild stolen by CPS. And there's a cop involved. And actually her daughter was probably murdered to steal this child. And you know, it became it was a corrupt case out in New Jersey. And then it even became even more corrupt because they actually torched her home in New York. I mean, so this is how crazy this stuff gets. And you know, you're not seeing this in the newspaper, you know, because no one's talking about it. But so it was just such a terrible case. And you know, and this family's been cut all ties. It's more involved, but you know, all ties have been cut. She hasn't seen her grandchild in years,
Mhm.
and this was her only grandchild. Meanwhile, this cop had like 8 kids, and like he had like 3 or 4 of his own kids, 3 or 4 that were foster care kids, you know. And they only wanted to adopt her kid or her grandchild because the mother, who was murdered probably, um she was just going to win some money from a lawsuit. And so we believe that was the motive for it. But, you know,
Mhm.
I ended up with her. There was a woman, she's now deceased. She was a wonderful advocate on CPS. Her name was Cheryl J. Newton Boyer. And she and a woman, Josie Perez, used to have a show called Abuse Freedom Live, which was on, I don't know what year they started, but I've known them. I had known them from, you know, maybe 2009 or so. But in 2010, we exposed like 20 cases of the CPS corruption. And I sent it to Attorney General Eric Holder. And you know, but you know what? And also it went to John Walsh of America's Most Wanted, because
Oh,
we were trying to
wow.
we
Okay.
wanted to make it an Amber Alert when kids are being taken, because a lot of times these kids are taken with no due process again. And but you know what? What did he do? Absolutely nothing. Nothing I know of, you know. And because I was making so much noise in '09 about everything, I had this US Marshal contact me. And he had contacted me in the summer of '09. And he said, you know, I hear you have problems. I believe he came from Senator Nancy Schaefer. I don't know if you know who she is,
Oh,
but
yes.
she was big on CPS, and she was murdered, her and her husband. And I believe they were murdered. They've
Mhm.
tried to make it was a suicide. But, you know, I know she was exposing things, and had become very afraid for her life.
Mhm.
And actually I hadn't realized until I gave an interview back a few years ago with somebody, and I had really found that I had become in a group with her, but I hadn't at the time really known who she was yet. And but I think she was the one who got the US Marshal to contact me, because he came from Georgia and she was from Georgia.
Hmm.
But it was never, the U.S. Marshal never told me and confirmed that that was true. But since I had the U.S. Marshal and I had Kamala Harris's office too, I would write when Obama came into office. I would write I went to mainstream media, especially had Schwarzenegger and all this involved, but everybody's covering everything up. So I've taken up things with mainstream media for years. And
Mhm.
from when he came in, which was like the summer of '09, and he was removed at the end of 2012. I wrote numerous emails. I would give Obama, I'd write letters and things, and I would send them for Obama or Holder or whatever. And I would take up a lot on media, the election process, campaign finance funds, all this. And because what really got me started on that was because Jerry Brown, when he went to run, now I was told by the U.S. Marshal in April of 2010, and this is right when this woman's home was torched too. I reported it to him at the same time, but he told me my case was going to be settled and resolved. Never is. How many years later is this? 10 more years. I mean, that's pretty disgusting.
That
And I
is.
wouldn't have gone through a lot of things and harm, and a
Oh.
lot of other people wouldn't have either if Obama and Holder had taken some responsibility to what was going on in the court system, because it was
Mhm.
badly broken down under Bush. And I had filed back in '09, actually, I had filed a lawsuit against the judiciary, a RICO. And at that time, I had named everybody I had dealt with who I felt was crooked or didn't operate, from my California matter and my New York matter at that time. And Obama and Holder were named. They were both named really for accountability.
Mhm.
But and I know online, the feds put up online my judiciary case, which the judge there, he didn't look at nothing. He was putting as frivolous, I'm not, I'm whatever, delusional or whatever. And, and it's frivolous, but they had put all this case law up why it wasn't frivolous. So they were going to do something, but then nobody does anything. Right.
Right.
So it's like, wow. So the same cover up, the same
Mhm.
corruption goes on and on and on. And, so to me, which is terrible because,
Right.
you don't realize how harmful it is. And, and it really does kill people. I mean, trauma kills, and
It
it's
does.
used as a weapon. It's used as a weapon of choice to really harm people and
Mhm.
impoverish people too. And they'll steal. I know, like I had met a woman at Catholic Charities, and she would
Mm.
tell me that women would come in there. They would be so worried about CPS stealing their children. This was in New Jersey. So from what's going on, even with COVID or any of these things, the more people are pushed into poverty, the more you're going to have these children being stolen. uh, and the funding, or even the just taking of children from parents to put in foster care or whatever in CPS, and the money scheme that they have that going on for the adoptions of it with the title IVD and E funding, which was all
Mhm.
created under the Clintons. So I really believe those funds would be better to be terminated completely.
I
And,
agree.
it would be much, much better than this, because it's created their own supply chain for them to steal children. And to me, it's horrendous. And I mean, you have the same thing. You have, guardianships, you have all these different areas of the courts that are, so corrupted.
Mhm.
But back to the mainstream media, for me, I have a big issue in particular with CNN, because it ties to Cuomo, and MSNBC, NBC, with Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver. They, I actually had met in everything I think of, I have to go back in years. I met in early 2012, Dylan Ratigan. And I used to have Dylan Ratigan at MSNBC be a contact. Now, I don't know if any of these reporters ever get anything or not, but I met him and I gave him some information. at a book signing at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco. And he had a book out called Greedy Bastards. And he did a lot at the time on the foreclosures and the banking and all that. You know, he would call them pirates. He'd be calling them crooks and stuff, you know. So I, you know, of course, you know, I understand that very easily, you know. And, but he ended up, after I met him, now I have no idea if it's related, but he literally gave up his show like a few months later. So I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting, you know, because I know I gave him actually the Feinstein letter about how she's got no jurisdiction for the judiciary, you know. So it's like, you're in the judiciary. She's been in the judiciary for years. Schumer's in the judiciary for years. So our courts are a mess, right? You are all part of aiding all this crime, you know, in the judicial branch of government, you know. So how can you say that you're, you know, there's no oversight? So it's only these judicial regulatory agencies, be it the state bar or like in New York, the grievance committee, they're the only ones that are doing anything. And if they're going to still be corrupting your case and they're not going to do anything, you got no help, you know? And I'm like, I recently, after the whole thing with the George Floyd issue and people were taking up things on justice, I'm like, you know, of course I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I want justice still. And I know a lot of people who want justice. And if you saw, like I saw in Ulster County, New York, they all want to have a justice program. San Mateo, they want to have a justice program. I'm like, hello, you got a justice issue that you still haven't resolved. You know, I mean, let's look at this, right? And I say, you people are no different than anybody, than the cop leaning on George Floyd's neck and everybody watching. You're no different. You just keep aiding it because no one has the guts to arrest anybody. I've said to them, just go arrest 3 people. Go arrest 3 people. Let's see if you do it. And there is a guy or two who will correspond with me. And so I think some of them really do want to have it settled and resolved, you know, but I'm like, well, just do it, you know, arrest them, you know, I mean, or just settle with us, because I got a bunch of victim cases there that have been given there years ago. And there's other cases that went to, you know, Harris or this other guy, her, you know, with Brown's office involved. So Harris, you know, she really left it all hanging when she went to be a senator. And when she went to be a senator, you know, because she knows I can't stand the fraud in these elections. I'm like, here you're grubbing a buck off of somebody for a donor. And I go, I would like my property. People would like their children. And here you're sitting here violating me, victimizing me for years. For what? What type of leader are you? You're not a leader. You shouldn't be president or vice president ever, you know. And I know there's a variety of people who would totally agree in California, you know, but no one knows that. And even when she went to be a senator, I would do things. She would be going to an event at a restaurant or wherever to raise money. I would contact them ahead of time, giving information, saying, tell your donors not to fund her, you know, basically, because she's lying to you. She's lying to you, and she will lie and lie and lie. She is a liar. And, you know, I don't know what her whole deal is and why I've been held hostage here for years. Meanwhile, everybody's been held hostage, you know. All these courts, to me, I don't know how many times, even with her in my emails, I would say, and even with Obama, I'd be like, free the American hostages, because you don't realize how you get trapped in their system and you can't get out, you know, or you have to leave without your property or whatever it is, your children, you know, anything, because you're not going to get help from generally, you know, it's very rare to find help. And the media, you know, even with President Trump, you know, the media, how much they hate his guts, you know, I mean, they really do. And I because I had been already in this conversation with 9 San Mateo Board of Supervisors. Now, they got no jurisdiction. I said, how can you, if you're paying these people, and this is in Ulster County, I go, if you're paying these people, you have to be able to take some sort of jurisdiction. I mean, you know, this is crazy. How many people does the state of California employ, right?
Mhm.
I got victims coming to me because nobody's helping them. None of you people are helping them, right? And I said, you know, we would all like to be freed out of this situation. I've been paying the price 16 years for that woman defrauding me. I go, more people are altering my identity in more ways. Even in New York, the woman's altering my identity. I go, you know, and there's even in that, there's like a money laundering scheme. There's so much in there. And even the New York case even has an employee who is a Berkshire Hathaway employee. So I've taken up things with Warren Buffett. You know, all sorts of things. You can't imagine how this stuff gets so out of control. You know, and our media is really just terrible.
Mhm.
And even I had back years ago, the Family Civil Liberties Unions, I had already prior had filed complaints with the FTC and the FCC about our media. And I had filed a complaint with the Family Civil Liberties Union, who would also take up issues on divorce and things of that nature
Mhm.
about this. And, you know, it's really, I look at everything, you know, a lot of, I believe, of why things didn't change over is due to the banking system and the
Mhm.
Federal Reserve. There's been this global reset going on for years, you know, but to me, we should really have the Treasury take over and just start printing our own money instead of Federal Reserve notes. So there's a big problem there, and I think a lot of these states were always monetizing on these properties, all this, and this is how they stayed afloat in essence.
Mhm.
That's my opinion of it. And but these elections, you know, and I think this bill that recently was going through, where they showed how they want to give all this money to the overseas and like $600 to Americans, you know, that to me is right there. You see how they do not represent Americans, and they don't. The Congress really needs to go. The whole election process needs to be scrapped, campaign
Yes.
finance, all of it abolished. And
Right.
I would even get rid of the whole Democratic Republican system because it does not, there's no credence to it whatsoever. And it's really a constructive fraud where they're deceiving people,
Mhm.
voters, and everybody. Um, and so they can get donations and all that. And I had taken up a big thing because here I had been speaking with the San Mateo Board of Supervisors, and then they come out with Kamala Harris. I say, oh, geez, Kamala Harris. You know, if anyone's got more dirt on Kamala Harris, it's me because I've been around her for years. And so I say, oh, gee. And so, and she knows I'll be speaking about her. It's not even a question, you know, because she knows how I am on the subject anyway. And I have taken up between New York and California. I've literally started calling them out to say, you better have your criminals off the damn payroll, or I want you all removed. And
Mhm.
I've written to Trump and the military more recently, saying, you know, I've named both of my counties, San Mateo and Ulster County, as and anarchist counties that don't abide by the Constitution. They're crooks running the county. There's been crooks running everything, you know, for
Mhm.
years,
Mhm.
and that they really should. I'm a real believer. From years ago, martial law should be declared, and you know there should be military tribunals because the treason and the sedition by politicians, judges,
Mhm.
DAs, you know, when you have a crooked DA, you know,
Uh-huh.
I mean, you know, it just taints, if you're allowing all this organized crime and corruption in your court and you're the DA and you're not going to do anything about it, it really taints all your criminal matters, you know, and it's just shows how dysfunctional everything is and how broken things are.
Mhm.
And and so you know, but as far as this, you know, I really had started, and this is what I was going to say. Because Jerry Brown was directly violating my rights because I
Mhm.
subpoenaed him, and then he's running. Now I knew my case was supposed to be settled before the election for him to be governor, but in that election, he really had That election was in 2010, I believe. Or at the end of 2010, and it was against Meg Whitman, who was at the time the CEO of Hewlett Packard. And now she's a big billionaire, but basically I started saying, and when Kamala Harris came in, I said, well, basically he stole her money, because he's deceiving the public. He's violating my rights directly, besides other people's rights and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And, here she is trying to run in this election, but, I don't know. And it really comes from the Secretary of State's office too, where this is coming out of. And so that was the first time I really started taking up election fraud, was with Jerry Brown. And, and I kind of look at Feinstein and all of them, Congresswoman Spear, all of them as frauds. I actually was even arrested by Congresswoman Spear in early 2012, actually, after I had went back to California. I was trying to move back there, and I had an office that was right down the block from her. And I went in there and I said, I used to do this with Eric Holder. I said, we are victims of your court system here for years, and we're being like held hostage here. Nobody gets any resolve or anything. And I said, we want relief payments. I want relief payments for everybody, because these situations are very traumatic. Everybody's had physical harm to themselves. We're being tortured, in essence, over our property because you had people stealing it or whatever was going on in all their circumstances. And so it ended up, it was denied. And so then I read her office and Harris and everybody. I was reading them the Miranda rights. I'm like, give it to Congress, read them the Miranda rights. And it ended up then, in the beginning of 2012, I had my third physical intestinal injury. And I ended up going into the hospital because I was stressed over money and all this,
Geez.
and I ended up having that. And then I got like almost in a $10,000 bill, and I had been staying with someone. I was having an issue, I was having an issue with the medicine I was on, and I was having something else. So I ended up saying to Spear, I said, well, we want relief payments. I'll ask for a lesser amount, right? And so then I told her, I said, this is an email. I said, now she's known about this since 2008. I've made a public display of this whole thing. I said, why don't you pull your plastic Botox head out of your butt, lady? And I said, lawmaker, there was an article about her and SU being lawmakers. I'm like, lawmakers? What type of lawmaker are you when you're allowing people to be victimized and have our constitutional rights, our human rights violated? And I started this whole big thing about no jurisdiction for humanity, no jurisdiction for humanity, there's no jurisdiction for truth either, so I got, and then what was hysterical about it was the judge who signs off. It was totally trumped up, fraudulent. Because what she said I was threatening her. I was threatening her, and what she really wanted to do was this was pretty wild. Was she was trying to give me a police escort out of the county. So I was like, wow. So that was really why, because she was running in the election, which I didn't know at the time. So she really wanted me out because she knew I would have caused her trouble. And then the judge who signs off on it is the judge who violates my jury trial, the first judge who violates my jury trial with Schwarzenegger. So I said, well, this is just, par for the course here, of, how this stuff goes, So, but that was her real agenda. And I had really hoped Obama, in 2012, like in the summer of 2012, or just prior to the summer, there was a group that started called Lawless America. I don't know if you've heard of them. A man named Bill Windsor. He had started this whole effort to go around to every state filming court corruption cases. And I filmed on 7/2/2012. I let Kamala Harris know. I said, I'm filming, about my story. There's a whole big effort to expose what is going on in these corrupt courts that nobody's taking any responsibility still for. And I had hoped Obama was going to. I really, there was no president I followed more than Obama, because I really thought he was going to be the change. I was like so happy. I'm like, well, I have a black president. The blacks always defend their rights.
Mhm.
They have to be the ones who will probably take some sort of responsibility, but then they don't. And he's still covering it up at the 2012 election. And actually, I have from Harris. I'm surprised she sent this to me, actually, but it's a letter from her. She had created, when she was the Attorney General, I guess she created, I'm not sure who did, but it's a newer process, and it's called the Public Inquiry Unit. And I had taken up that there was fraud in the 2012 election with Obama, which also tied to Spear and Eshoo and a whole bunch of other people. And so I got a letter from her, but no one ever answered it. But it's in my book, actually, that letter. And but she mentions about how the Secretary of State really should be the responder. And now I had taken up with the Secretary of State originally. Deborah Bowen was the woman who was in charge, but I never got any responses. And so even when Harris was running to be senator, I was taking up with Secretary of State Alex Padilla. Now Padilla is just being recently named to replace Kamala Harris in the Senate by Newsom. So which I find very interesting, because I've taken up with him, her fraud and all this about violating people's rights and everything, and aiding this corruption. So to me, I find it as election fraud. I look at it as like campaign finance fraud, election fraud, and it becomes voter fraud because the voters are totally deceived. And it's really a constructive fraud, which is created by the Federal Election Commission. I actually even, in this election, once Harris was running or to be VP with Biden, I ended up going to the Federal Election Committee, filing a complaint, and they gave me some information, and it turned into, and I had Padilla on it too, and I said, I was looking for someone to really file a lawsuit, but it's very hard to find someone who's going to take any who would file a lawsuit. I did try, but what happened at one point when they sent me something, I looked at it and I said, well, this is a constructive fraud, because I don't see anything about the issues I want to take up. I don't see anything. And then I went back and I went through some election stuff, and I came out with like a million charges. And I put them all in there. And the woman, they have like, they say a respondent will respond to you in 15 days. So I was like, well, who is the respondent? Is it Secretary of State Padilla? Is it Harris herself? Who is the respondent? Well, then this woman totally ignored me. She would not respond to me. I went back to her like 2 or 3 times. Who is the respondent? Who is the respondent? No answer. No answer. So no one will respond, so to me, that just shows, their own deception in the structure of what's created in the whole election process. And for me, with this cover up between New York and California, it's also because both states, California and New York, are both very democratic states. And I really never looked at it as a Democratic problem versus a Republican problem, because I knew Bush was in charge already, when I came in. But I'm like, well, both of these states are pretty bad off, and they are a lot of Democrats. But, I kind of find the cover-ups of it as a big deception, as I said, a constructive fraud where they're getting away, not telling the truth about what really exists in your state government, and really how there is no real leadership. And now they've also, I found it pretty hysterical that they had Biden was appointing the now California Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, who is also the one now who's in charge of my case, because Harris left without anything ever being resolved. So, I mean, I don't know what his whole status is in the whole thing, but I found it hysterical. But they were making him like the health secretary or whatever, his department. But I'm like, you know what? You are allowing, as the Attorney General, you are allowing a lot of trauma and physical harm to people in your court system. So how can you even be considered anybody who is related to good health? You're not.
Mhm.
I said, none of you. I said, the best thing will be all of you are out of a job, because really, that's how bad this
Mhm.
to me has gotten. And I mean, I would love to see the military shut everything down and take over the courts. I'm like, take over the courts, take over the Capitol buildings. That's your major crime scene. I don't want to see military all in the street or anything like that. But to me, I said you could go in, you could shut your court down, try and bring all the cases, all the people who are in these cases who are held hostage there. They know who's corrupt. To find out who's really defrauding them or harming them or whatever, I mean, and people are there for years. One of the interesting things I found out, well, there were two things that were interesting with this. I had started going back to some victims, and one victim that wasn't exposed with this Commissioner Richard Dubois, but she is a Dubois victim. Actually, one of her daughter is now working for one of the board of supervisors. So I said, "Oh, isn't that a coincidence?" She was a child victim, and the mother sustained a lot of harm at her as a child. So that is, I think, an issue for them now with my case. And then there was an issue which I came upon, which I didn't know about. But see, at one point, when I was having my jury trial violated, I had this county attorney, Timothy Fox. His father was the DA. He followed me around for the 2 days that I'm going to jury trial. And he's definitely involved in the collusion of the corruption, to violate the trial and all that. And I want him arrested. But his father, a few years ago, his father was put in as the head of the State Bar of California. And I said, when I saw it, I said, "Oh my God." I go, "There's a crook, another crook running the State Bar." I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, I'm like, but like it doesn't stop with these people. And so, and what was wild is there's an attorney who, there's a case that I have known for many years. It's a long case too. And I knew this attorney was helping this woman. It was for helping, she does some issues on domestic violence.
Mhm.
And it was that case, and it was one of the other cases I had an exposure with this other advocate. But this attorney got disbarred, and she's really disbarred because this guy Fox was the head now of the State Bar, and even another DA from there is also, there's another tie-in with the DA's office besides the Foxes. But she had in her disbarment, about how they're really corrupt, blah blah blah, and all that. And so I said, "See, now this is a typical thing here. Here's an attorney who's trying to help victims. Now she's disbarred, and I got an attorney who defrauded me blatantly. I mean, I've sustained a lot of harm, and I have all these people involved because nobody's in charge of anything. And here she is sitting free for 16 years. I'm paying the price. I've been in jail. I've been arrested twice. But this is how, because nothing operates. I mean, I
Mhm.
said there has to be somebody in your county government, and in both of my situations, everything. And this is to me a big thing when you see, even like in the George Floyd case or the Breonna Taylor case or any of these cases, is they leave it up to the county government to take jurisdiction for the crime that is committed by their people. But what the problem is, they don't really ever really want to take any liability for it.
Mhm. No
And
accountability.
it's a big liability issue, and they have the qualified immunity and all that, which to
Mhm.
me is out the window when you're committing intentional crimes, or judicial immunity or anything. But it ends up, they want that to be the jurisdiction, but it's really bad because in my case, they should, both of my cases in San Mateo and Ulster County, they should have just settled the matters. Even in 2012 in Ulster County, they were looking like they were going to settle the matter. And then I go through all this chaos. I mean, I sustained a lot of harm, and I'm not going to let you ever get away with victimizing me the way you did in my home, you
Mhm.
know, or to steal it. You know, to me, I'm like, I'll fight you tooth and nail. And because you're such evil, they're just so evil and they're so
Mhm.
crooked. They, to me, I label them terrorists in Ulster County because I'm like, I don't know how many people. I have like all your head people. I got cops. I got old people, sheriffs. You know, even stuff from when I went to jail, judges. You know, I mean, this I had such a terrible, they assaulted me so badly in that criminal case.
Mm.
And I mean, I could never get a fair trial, and not one judge should have been doing anything in my case, because even the judge, actually the judge who arraigned me, he sold me my, when he told me his name, I said, you sold me my property. I go, my address is altered, my identity is altered from when you sold it to me. You need to go, and you know, that's a violation of due process. You should, before you're arraigning me, you should be checking that out, you know.
Mhm.
But they don't care. They don't care about anything.
They
They just
don't.
care. Yeah, they don't care about anything. They will do whatever crime they want to commit. And it just shows how one bad apple, like this county clerk, she knew she should have never come back to harass me in the manner she did. I mean, what type of lunatic is this? And
Mhm.
her, and what's interesting, her sister is the second in command, who I had also filed charges on. You have all these family dynamics, this nepotism. Like I have in the San Mateo case, I have a DA, father, and county attorney's son. And then I got the two head people at Wilson Elser involved who know I'm defrauded. They're both a father and son. So I got these fathers and sons that want to harm me. I got sisters in a county clerk that want to harm me. And then I got the Kennedy family, or you know, Schwarzenegger or Cuomo. I go, I don't know, man, but I have my last name, married name is Kennedy. I go, I don't know how the hell that happened, but you know, it's just these weird family dynamics, you know,
Mhm.
and they really are so corrupt. You can't believe it, you know, that, and here you're paying your taxes to these criminals, you know, and and you know, I think if most people knew, this is what I said to them at San Mateo, I said, you know, if the people in this county knew that you're sitting here victimizing me for all these years and all these other people, and we've all had physical harm, we've all had, be it acid harm, children harm, all sorts of stuff, they would be outraged. They wouldn't pay you a damn friggin' dime. But that's why you got the media, even at the local level, all covering it up, you know.
Mhm.
Everybody covers it up, and you know, and it's really just it's unreal, really, what
Mhm.
exists, and how the Americans people are really just so deceived. And you know, I'm really hoping that right now, I mean, even Biden with all this with the Chinese, and I mean, there's so many, to me, I'm not even going into things where I could talk about a lot of usurped powers or countries in different issues or areas of our government or operations that shouldn't be there, you know. And even I've said this to the military. To me, there's been like no national security for years,
Mhm.
and I'm like, what type of national security is this? This is no national security. And I laughed that they're bringing Susan Rice back into the situation, because when Obama had her as national security director, they'll look at everything overseas. They want to always make like terrorism's overseas, but terrorism is alive and well right here, foreign and domestic, you
Mhm.
know. And but Susan Rice was someone who I had complained, and now I would never complain to the UN, but at the time I didn't look at them as a usurped power into our government. But in 2010, along with another group, a bunch of people, we had filed like human rights violations with the UN Commission, and she was part of that. And then, you know, here is she with ABC, you know, and the the whole, you know, I'm like, the whole media, you know, usurpation, you know, of our country. And, you know, and you got to question, you know, even these campaign finances funds pay all this mainstream media for ads and all that. That's their own, how they're all making money off of letting us be harmed, American people be harmed tremendously,
Right. And
especially, huh?
oh, and there's no remedy at law.
There is no remedy. There is no remedy. You know, that's what I said there. I said there has to be somebody who's in charge, you know. And I go, your governors aren't. They're part of it. Everybody's part of it,
Hmm.
you know. And that's where there's such a big, big issue. And you know, and you know, I don't know. So right now, I'm really for Marshall. I've been for martial law for a long time, but I'm hoping that something is going to give here. Um, and hopefully restore our republic, restore the Constitution.
Hmm.
But you really need to address the grievances of a lot of American families whose lives have been shattered by this stuff. And, you know, so until the truth is
Yes.
coming out or arrests are made, I don't believe, you know, I don't see anything being restored, you know, until that
Right.
starts to, until that really happens. And, you know, and tragically, there's just so many, you know, I really, you know, the FBI, even Kamala Harris could have, in my case, she could have tons of indictments. I don't know, you know, but, you know, I still think even if she took everybody down, in my case, that should be taken down, but I still can think she's a person who should be vice president or president. There's no way. I would never think she should ever be, just because, you know, if someone knew that that person violated people's rights and aided organized crime and all this corruption, you know, I don't think the general public would ever want that person in office,
Hmm.
you know. And I think there has to be, you know, like you know, all these, you know, I could go back to, like, I look at the Federal Reserve as a big perpetrator of a lot of crimes in the U.S., especially with the foreclosure, a whole variety of things, and a lot tied to our money system. But you know, like Alan Greenspan, who was the head of the Federal Reserve, who was really a big part of starting the whole foreclosures. And there's a lot between the Clintons and the Bushes and the New World Order and all this different stuff. You know, but there's so many people who should have been
Hmm.
arrested like a million years ago, but they
Right.
keep always coming back out. Governor Chris Christie, I have a big thing with him too, because I worked, you know, in when Hurricane Sandy happened, I worked in a program, a grant program for, it was called New Jersey Stronger in New Jersey. It was a grant program for Hurricane Sandy victims. This program was all domestic and foreign terrorism. I mean, you can't believe it. But the real kicker was Christie in the state of New Jersey had all the Hurricane Sandy victims signing their rights away to their homes to get funds and all this. I mean, the whole program was built backwards. It was everybody was stealing all the money with the victims getting squat, you know. And I ended up, how I am a rights activist. And I mean, I started looking at all the things going on. I was like, I can't believe what's going on in this place. And so I ended up making a big statement on, actually it was on 11/11/13. And so I was a whistleblower on that even. And here I gave Kamala Harris tons of information for Obama, all sorts of stuff tied to military contractors, all sorts of things. And I was ripping Christie, ripping him. I started writing for, it was called the U.S. Independent. And they were a bunch of whistleblowers, you know, talking. And I have on my blog a lot. It's 2014. He was really committing crimes against the Sandy victims, besides all this other stuff in the state, you know. But here he is in the election again, staying in office. And actually, before he ran in the 2016 election, which was with Trump and Hillary Clinton and all that, um, this U.S. Independent, now I don't know what happened to it, but it was to me, a big cover up. Either someone bought it or to shut everybody up.
Hmm.
So it totally vanished. There's like one interview of me that I did with another group that I think is online still. But otherwise, and they would put pictures and I was coming out on him. So here, to me, here's Kamala Harris and Obama. Now I would assume Kamala Harris gave it to Obama because I was taking up stuff with him directly. And here they both are, just aiding Christie, you know, and here's Christie now at ABC, you know. And I actually wrote Trump in one of my recent letters, and I said, I want to tell you, he's a really a crooked scum, you know, he's a really low life. And you know, I mean, because he would consider him like a friend, you know, but I'm sure he didn't know that, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
so I notified him of that, you know. I said, you know, and the military even. I said, there's huge terrorism in those programs. I said, I wonder if HARP, you know, HARP is a weather weaponry. I said, I don't know if it's coming from our military or somebody else's, but you know, there's been so many storms, and I don't know. I mean, I know stuff tied to Hurricane Katrina, what tied to the Hurricane Sandy, certain aspects, but and New York had one. I don't know what Cuomo did as far as his grant awards, but you know, to me, I look at that because I've literally witnessed when they'll all of a sudden there'll be a storm, and then they
Mhm.
want to raise the debt ceiling for money. So I'm like, yeah, because somebody probably wanting bucks, and they, you know, be it they regentrify an area or they steal property or you know whatever goes on, you know, they can cause a lot of people a lot of harm actually. And you know, but it's just how much terrorism really resides. And I think if most military soldiers realized that there's so much terrorism in our own country, they'd be
Mhm.
really upset actually. And I think
Mhm.
the military has been lax really on taking authority for our nation. And I've spoken about that plenty of times too. You know, and so that's why I'm really hoping that they really do something with this election. I think this election is a prime time to really take the whole sham system down and you know, and start something fresh. You
Mhm.
know, because otherwise the same stuff keeps existing without anything really happening, and so we're stuck in the same limbo land, unfortunately. And you know, to me, I think all Americans deserve better than what really exists here. And you know, and hopefully gets our constitution, our courts back, you know, to a lawful society instead of criminals running everything.
Yeah, I
So
agree. I agree because I mean, even I myself have written complaint letters and
mhm.
complaint letters. I mean, on multiple attorneys, multiple letters. They're not doing anything. There's no accountability for the
Yep.
judiciary or these lawyers. It's really sickening.
Oh, I know. There's no accountability. There's no oversight. There's nothing, you know, and that's been for a long time, a very long time, too long, too long. And yeah, so I don't know. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And I go, no, maybe because both New York and San Mateo, you know, California, know I've been coming down on them. I've even read them Miranda rights emails
Mhm.
for Kamala Harris and everybody.
Mhm.
They know I'm like right out there. You know, I don't have any fear factor with these people because I've dealt with them for years. And so I don't know if they do anything, but I'm praying someone does. I go, it's either they're going to do something or the military and Trump does something. I'm just praying somebody does something. You know?
Definitely, the
So
court systems need to be fixed. And tell us again, what is the name of your book?
the name of my book is "And Justice for All: An American Illusion," which really goes into, you know, as I worked on Wall Street, I look at all of the, you know, like I, even when they were setting up the whole debacle, I'm like, I can't believe what they're setting up because I was a big short seller and stuff. And
Mhm.
I'm like, you know, I ended up, I missed out because I was fighting all this crime and all this, and my business was getting destroyed because I had, you know, I was ripping money out, doing all sorts of things, you know, to fight back, you know. So I'm like, well, I learned, I know a lot though about the foreclosures, more than I'm even letting on. But and I've been involved with a few, and I've even been out, I know you're out in Pennsylvania, and I've been to Harrisburg out there, and which is your state capital to the Supreme Court there. And I'll tell you, there even I know some foreclosures there that I've been involved with, and they don't do nothing. You know, they just go, well, it's corrupt, and they're not doing anything. You know? So it's just a broken sham of a system. I look at DC, the Supreme Court, is a ruse. You know, that, you know, and even media is talking about the Constitution because, well, you know, it's overall not abided by anywhere, you know, and you know, at least in our other court and all the lower courts and even Supreme Courts. So you know, Even New York, when they created the foreclosures, they created a non-judicial foreclosure process. Like I had an RJI, which meant I had to have judicial intervention filed, even for the second one. But they violated that. But that just shows. I don't know how many states created that, but that's a violation of the Constitution right there for due process. To have a non-judicial, it was just foreclosure process. It was just so they could steal easier. And if you look at, I did a show on that Abuse Freedom Live. I invited Eric Holder, Attorney General. I invited him to this show with some other people. This was back in, I think, the beginning of 2011. And at that time, I had kind of figured out how many homes were stolen at that point in time. And it was an astronomical number. And, and now if you look at it over the years, how many more homes have been, I mean, it's tragic for so many families and, what they lost and, and how many times the banks just won't take your payments. And, there's so many different things that go on, and their selling of the mortgages and all this and that. And it's terrible. But, it's just been a crime spree, really. Just a crime spree. But I really, it is very sad. I think it's very sad for all Americans, really.
Yes.
That, that families, so many family lives have been destroyed over this nonsense by these people in these governments, county government or state government. And nevertheless, for the amount of people they employ, it's like you should be able to have some sort of authority. And even actually, as Kamala Harris, I have a letter from her as a senator. This wasn't to me, this was to a DSS victim. But her process too was to go to the governor. She had, though, in it now you could go to the FBI, but I've never seen the FBI work. And I know even in Ulster County, somebody I know who is a long-term victim, never got her whole family was destroyed in lots of ways. And I know she's tried with the DA to have certain things prosecuted. And I know not long ago she went there and they were giving her to go to the FBI, and she called them, but she never heard from them. The FBI, I think, I as far as I've never seen the FBI really get involved with too much of the court corruption ever. And I know when with Christie, that Family Civil Liberties Union, I gave a complaint to me, most of the U.S. attorneys, all that to me is a joke. And like with Christie, there were a whole bunch of people tied to this Family Civil Liberties Union. A lot of people put in complaints with the U.S. Attorney's Office on Governor Christie. And I did one for him on the Hurricane Sandy stuff. And, but, nothing happens,
Oh, geez.
And that's that. And there were a lot of people doing stuff, tied to the courts with the corruption and all that. And and this is what I missed when I started to say about with Obama. I do want to clarify this. And this is really where I lost it with Obama, was because to me, when he ran in the 2012 election, I think he should have come clean already. But it ended up in December of 2013, there was a big group of this group, Lawless America, and they went to DC to they were going to be at like the Capitol building and a variety of different things. And Obama nobody from Congress would meet with them whatsoever. So, I mean, it's just how they use that no jurisdiction type of thing. So they just ignore everybody, and
Right.
and that to me was really a tell-all sign there. I mean, because I know he has online, like I have he put up online like congressional testimonies of people. Like, so I have mine up there, but I think there's like 1,000 or so. I don't know how many people he ended up actually filming, but he filmed a lot of people in all the states and all types of corruption. And, but that they would not meet with anybody really was a tell-all sign by Obama, really, and in his failure to really address the problem. and they just let the problem grow and grow and grow and be more out of control. And right now, I think what you're seeing is too the dysfunction of the Congress and the government, and which has grown over the years, like compared to like when I was first a victim of this divorce crime. Back at that time, you didn't have the social media, you didn't have anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where you have Facebook or Zoom or your podcasts or any type of media. Like I made my own blog after 2012. I started my own blog during the Obama administration, and I wrote a lot. But right now I haven't been really interested in writing. But at least it let people have their own outlet to express. Or there's been so many companies that have come about over the years, but still those to really tell the truth about the courts, like you are, somebody who does, but still, there's still people who won't touch every topic,
You're right.
But, that's for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah.
How can people reach you if they want to write to you or?
I had, you could write me at And Justice for All 292020 at yahoo.com.
Okay.
And my book is And Justice for All, An American Illusion by Cheryl A. Kennedy on Amazon.com.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'd like to have you back on for like an update, maybe in a couple months.
Okay,
If you'd
sounds
like
good,
to do that.
Marianne.
Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we covered most of whatever I could think of saying. So
Well, you were very informative, and I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else will learn a lot. And this is what we need. So I totally thank you.
Yeah, I've been around a long time. so I've witnessed too much.
Well, God bless you. You've been through a lot. And I appreciate you. So
thank you. I appreciate you doing this too.
Okay. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in the family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again in the future for another awesome podcast. And thank you so much again.
Thanks a lot, Marianne. Have a good night.
You too. Have a good night.